Welcome back to Creating Lasting Investments. I'm Arito Chakravarti, and today we're diving into the dramatic world of financial meltdowns, what causes them, how they spread, and why their consequences are felt not just nationwide, but also worldwide. Let's break it down. What is a financial meltdown? It's a severe and sudden collapse in the financial system, and when it hits, the effects are felt everywhere. Households panic, markets spiral, and major institutions are shaken to the core. We often see huge losses in the value of stocks, real estate, and even currency. Entire banks or large businesses may collapse, and because today's economies are deeply connected, even a local crisis can go global in a flash, spreading instability from one country to another. Financial meltdowns often mark the beginning of long, painful recessions or even depressions with widespread consequences for jobs, savings, and economic growth. There are several main types of financial crises. First, there's stock market crashes. This is when stock prices fall very quickly and by a lot. People lose money fast, and it causes fear in the economy. A famous example is Black Tuesday in 1929, which led to the Great Depression. Next, bank runs. This happens when many people rush to withdraw their money from a bank at the same time because they are scared the bank will fall. If too many people withdraw, the bank might run out of money and collapse because there's no one to lend to. Thirdly, housing market crashes. This is when house prices suddenly drop. It causes people to lose the value of their homes and hurts banks that gave out mortgages. For example, in 2018, house prices fell in some areas, causing problems for homeowners and lenders. Each type of crisis can cause big problems for the economy and everyday people. So here are two more important types of financial crises. Currency crises. This happens when a country's currency suddenly loses a lot of value. That makes imports more expensive and debt harder to pay back. A big example is Argentina in 2001. So Argentina, they couldn't pay back over $100 billion in debt. Because of this, public services like hospitals and schools collapsed. Teachers went unpaid, transport stopped, and many people lost their jobs. Poverty and riots spread, and living conditions got much worse across the country. Secondly, sovereign debt crises. This is when a country can't pay back the money it borrowed from investors or other countries. This loss of trust causes serious problems, forcing governments to cut spending on healthcare, education, and transportation, hurting everyday life. Both of these crises show how badly a country's economy people can suffer when financial problems spiral out of control. Financial meltdowns happen because of a few main causes. Firstly, asset bubbles. This is when prices for things, houses, or stocks rise way too high, much more than they're really worth. Often, this happens because people keep buying, hoping prices will keep going up. But eventually, reality hits. Investors realize the prices are too high, and the bubble bursts, causing a sudden crash. Second, excessive risk-taking. Sometimes, banks and financial companies take big risks trying to make big profits. But if those risks don't pay off, it can cause big losses and start a meltdown. And thirdly, weak regulation. When rules are too weak, dangerous practices can happen, giving loans to people who might not be able to pay them back. These risky loans are called subprime loans. If too many people default, it can cause a crisis that spreads through the whole economy. Investor panic and contagion. When bad news spreads, fear grows quickly. Investors rush to sell assets, tech stocks, and cryptocurrencies, and this mass selling causes prices to crash, and panic eventually spreads across the world. This leads to currency drops, stock market crashes, money leaving countries, and it even causes recessions. Imbalances and leverage. This happens when banks, companies, or governments borrow too much money, sometimes from other banks or investors. Before the 2008 financial crisis, many banks borrowed huge amounts to invest in risky mortgage securities. When those investments failed, they couldn't pay back their debts, and it caused a financial collapse. Let's look at the most important financial meltdowns in history. First, as mentioned before, the Great Depression. It started with a huge stock market crash in the US, unemployment soared, and world trade collapsed, and this was the worst economic crisis of the 20th century. Next, the 1973 OPEC oil shock. Middle Eastern countries stopped selling oil to some countries, causing prices to skyrocket. This led to stagflation, a mix of high inflation, low economic growth, and rising unemployment in the US, UK, Canada, and Japan, among other countries. Then, the 1997 Asian financial crisis. Too much borrowing in East Asia caused currency values and stock markets to crash. The International Monetary Fund had to step in with bailout packages to help the affected countries. Here are two more major financial crises from recent history. The 2008 global financial crisis, and this crisis was caused by a housing bubble and risky banking practices. The 2001 Argentine crisis. Argentina faced a sudden currency devaluation, which made imports expensive and debt impossible to pay. Bank accounts were frozen, and the International Monetary Fund withdrew his support. This caused severe economic problems, including high unemployment and poverty. Financial meltdowns can cause serious problems that affect everyone. Firstly, massive job losses. As businesses struggle, many have to close or lay off workers, which causes unemployment to rise. Credit freezes. Banks get scared and stop lending money. This hurts businesses and people who need loans. Plunging asset prices. The value of homes, stocks, and currency drops, making people feel poorer and less likely to spend. Sovereign defaults. Sometimes governments can't pay their debts. This forces them to cut spending on important services, healthcare, and education. Widespread economic pain. People spend less. Companies invest less. And it can take years for the economy to recover, since people are spending and investing less than they should. How can individuals, such as you and I, prepare for financial meltdowns? Firstly, build emergency savings. Aim to save 3 to 6 months of expenses in an account you can easily access. Secondly, manage your budget. Track what you spend, cut unnecessary costs, and focus on what you really need. Stay informed. Learn about market trends, inflation, and economic news so you can make smart decisions. Avoid overborrowing. Debt is harder to handle during crisis, so borrow carefully. And finally, diversify your income. You can try part-time work, side gigs, or smart investments to create extra financial security. What should businesses do? They must respond very carefully. Firstly, they have to act quickly and transparently. They need to share verified facts, not guesses, and make sure everyone stays informed so they don't lose credibility. Secondly, engage with the public and media. Communicate calmly to reassure customers, investors, and partners. Offer compensation if needed. Refunds or service credits help keep customer trust. Manage cash flow. They need to cut unnecessary expenses and prepare for times with less income. And finally, use legal counsel. Review all statements with legal problems. So what can the government do to manage crisis? Firstly, central banks might lower interest rates or add money into the system, making borrowing cheaper to encourage spending and investment. Governments can also boost demand by spending more on projects, roads, and bridges, or by cutting taxes, putting more money into people's pockets. Or, to stop big failures, they may bail out important banks or industries that are at risk of collapsing. On a global level, countries work together through groups like the IMF and G20 to keep trade and credit flowing smoothly. And finally, Long-term reforms are important. Stronger rules and limits on risk help prevent the next crisis before it starts. What can we take away from this? Firstly, financial meltdowns remind us just how connected and fragile today's global economy really is. A problem that starts in one country or market can quickly spread worldwide, affecting millions of people. These crises can happen for many reasons, from risky loans and bubbles, where prices get way too high, to weak regulations and sudden waves of investor fear. The consequences aren't just short-term. Job losses, falling prices, and government defaults can impact economies and communities for many years, making recovery slow and painful. And that's why it's so important for individuals, businesses, and governments to prepare in advance. Having plans and safety nets can help reduce the harm when a crisis hits. And finally, most importantly, studying past financial meltdowns teaches us valuable lessons. By learning from history, we can better protect ourselves and avoid repeating the same mistakes over again. Thank you for watching, and that's all.